Привет из Дубая. С вами передача «Голубь мира», где разбираем крутые навыки. Спрашиваем на английском, отвечаем на русском. Подтягивайте язык или смотрите перевод в тайм-кодах. Let's talk about crisis management and let's start with the definition.
Crisis management, that is kind of activity when you think what will happen in negative way. For example, maybe it would be damage of your plant. Maybe you will spoil water in the river. Maybe you will damage the air above your factory and so on. So you should think how to avoid negative consequences. Maybe you should know how to call ambulance in a very fast way. Maybe you should have division of ambulance on your territory. Maybe you should have several steps how to clean the water or clean the air to not throw away which is dirty and so on. But also you should plan which would be providing you assurance that if something will go wrong, you know whom to call and what to say.
And when we're thinking about all of the possible, when we're trying to forecast all of the crises, what kind of dimensions we might be having in our head during this thinking process?
It's very easy and hard in the same time. You should have anti-crisis management for all your assets. If you have an idea, you should have think about it. If you have people, if you have money, if you have, for example, legacy, if you have some patents, if you are working with some foreign workers, all of this should be under coverage of anti-crisis management. All your assets could be attacked by accident or by some other people or by your concurrents.
And when we collect all of this, like a potential threats or dangers or risks, what should be the thinking or the framework to organizing them in the so-called like a backlog, or I think in the project management it's called risk registry, and giving them certain ranks and then executing on them.
Yes, it could be called risk registry or risk kit. You have, for example, 7 or 6 group of risks. We told about this, about buildings, about people, about idea, about money, about technology, about ecology, about law. In this case, you should describe what could happen potentially, and you should describe everything, every single detail. And sometimes you will be put some big animal close to the small bug. It's okay, but then you should prioritize this, how you believe. If there is a big probability or small probability, will it damage a lot or small? So you have some coefficients and you multiply them to understand which of this damage you're afraid more. Then you should divide them by levels, usually for 3 levels. First, you couldn't allow this. For example, you couldn't throw hard metals in the water. You couldn't show to everyone that from your tube goes black black smoke. You couldn't show to the policeman that, for example, you have too many damaged cars and so on. So you put this on the first layer, and you think that if this not covered yet by anti-crisis management, I should work very hardly to provide protection by money, by some special teams, by some technologies. Second, what would you do in the next year? And third, what would you do if you will have излишек денег, money,
Extra.
if you having extra money.
And when it comes to assessing risks, because like sometimes there might be not enough like expertise or like even a time or maybe information to give a proper scoring to the risk, like what should be the process of working with the experts, or still we need to think about this in advance and come to the field already prepared, so at least to speak the same language?
Yes, you're completely right. We should be prepared pre-war this meeting. So you should assemble all guys you have who have brains and ask them what would happen if, for example, it would be flood, if it would be a strong wind, if we have no electricity, if we have, I don't know, pressure in the tubes and so on. And they will say some very unpleasant things. What will be destroyed, what goes out, and what will be broken. And you just write it down, write down, and write out. And you know, if you are just making as a Rocky, you will never do it properly, because usually when you start to make assets, risk assets measurement, it goes like for 400 lines, even for small company with 30 people. If you work with a huge plant, it would be, I don't know, like 46,000 rows to explain what will happen. And if you'll meet specialists who works with such a company, such a plans, they also will show you a list about 120,000 rows, and they will say, is it applicable for you or not? And you will say, yes, this is could happen and this couldn't occur.
And when we look into the process of assessing the risk, like the moment we have this list handy, the moment like we do understand, okay, this is what probably could go on, those are the steps and the probability of it. Do we need to also instill the monitoring process or audit, and what should be the frequency? Maybe it should not be, like equal to all of the risks, but some of them, which is like a more easier to occur, we need to pay more attention to them, like during the check-in, and maybe do it even frequently.
There is several ways how to make risk management. First, to think to monitor all the assets, but sometimes you couldn't make them. For example, it would ask you to have like 1,000 people just sitting close to monitors to look for something. For example, like with ATM machines. When I was working in Alpha Bank Russia, I was responsible for 8.5 thousand ATM machines, and no one could look at these monitors all the time. For example, in the hugest Russian bank, so-called Sberbank, there is like 230,000 ATM machines, so no one is trying to think about it. It's much easier to insurance these machines, but not to monitor. The same, for example, with car. Okay, if you have 100 cars, maybe you will put some trackers about heating, about storing, or maybe about storing of petroleum. But if you have like 10,000 cars, you will just ask insurance company to make an insurance and nothing more. The same with hugest risks. No one believes that, for example, lightning will destroy your tower, and maybe, I don't know, some earthquake will happen in territory where it's haven't been for a long time, but sometimes it's happened. You know, there is a very unfair, but fortune is sometimes will turn to you by the back.
I think it's also relevant to what you said once, that, like there is no never say never, always use the probability, because, like this is how you can assess the thing. And funny enough, yesterday I was checking one of the LinkedIn jobs, and at the Pinkerton agency, which also has the representative in Dubai, I think they have the role of the risk analyst or something like this. And this role also says like, okay, sometimes you will need to lift items or like sit for longer or process a lot of the information. And I was thinking, wow, the big companies probably hiring those people, whether they're like investigators, detectives, or like any type of the risk assessors. But why can't the companies, let's say even smaller companies, can't pretend that something happened in advance? Because, for example, when I was working in some of the startups, there always was an accident. Let's say like money got stolen, or like the servers like fell apart or whatever, and there was like a post-mortem, and then the steps, what exactly we're gonna do. But why can't people really to like do all of this modeling? Probably it might be because such role not exist, or maybe it's like an expertise. But how to make sure, like let's say you go into a new company or whatever, how to make sure this is being like a thought way in advance, and there is like a dollar value of what might be the losses, so that like you can deliver this message to the stakeholders.
You know, we are all воспитаны, воспитывать детей.
Nurturing.
We are not all nurtured by women, and women just think with square meters of the flat or of the yard where you live, but it will not help you in the life. So I always say that if you are a risk manager or anti-crisis manager, you should be notarized by men. And I will tell you one example again about this Twin Towers in New York. There was a company was having several floors in this building, and there was one беспокойный, anxious
Anxious.
Man. He was a former military man, and he was asking every year for several times to all employees to leave the building through the floors, not by the elevators, and everyone was angry. But when it's happened, when this airstrike was happened, a lot of these guys were saved because they know where to run. And you know, it's very funny because of this man who was not loved by the people, because he was saying very strange things. You should use stairs to go out because we have now training, and everyone was angry. And why should we do this? But when it's suddenly happened, everyone understands this person is a hero. By the way, he died in this accident because he was helping people to manage out, and he was going in this building indefinite amount of time. The same with another. For example, I'm IT guy in my former life, so I always do backups. I always do checking of some machines and so on, and I have a lot of different tricks. And if I see that someone's do it in the wrong way, I always say, you never will lose data just in case if you have enough backups. And you know, if you, for example, 20 years old and you have no teachers which will show you some accident, you will never believe that everything could happen. You know, sometimes it's very funny. I have like two notebooks, 2 iPads, and 5 flashcards, and sometimes I have out of battery on all my devices, by suddenly I take another one. The same when I go to dive, I usually use 5 lighters, and last one is very small one. It's size of the bullet, and it's worked just for 5 minutes. And you know, there were just 2 times per my life when I was forced to take it out, but it was.
Think about the worst things that could happening in your life so that you at least have a good dreams and a quiet times. А мы рассмотрели навык антикризисный менеджмент и чем он полезен именно вам, всем мира.